Of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Hey, I just got a last minute text here to take care of, and there you go.
No live television.
Live television. Right, it's my wife. Give me the grocery list. Can you believe it?
Oh, that's an important one.
Well, I don't want to say, I'll get to you later because anyway. Anyway, today got two major things going on, the debt deal and Ken Paxton's impeachment. And I'm going to be reading straight from the impeachment article, so I'm not, speculating what they are because I'm reading exactly. They were filed yesterday in the Senate, so they're now public available to anybody who wants to read them. Also, the debt deal has been misrepresented, as always, in the media. You got the left-wing media going crazy and the right-wing media going crazy, but the truth is, as always, in the middle. There's some things that the Republicans and the conservatives will like and some things that they'll hate and vice versa, which is the nature of compromise. So busy week, though. Thursday, I have Jennifer Woods on with Harvest House. And I'll have Gabrina on next week, talk about the big weekend we just had. And a lot of people have been very enthusiastic in their response about the honey tour and the carnival. I would bet we may do that again, but we'll find out for sure next Monday. But I bet we'll do that again because that was, by all accounts, a very successful weekend. Did you drop by any of that by any chance?
I did not. I had a full weekend, but I wish I would have. I definitely saw it.
I saw it, and I kind of flew through it because, a lot of the rides were for kids, which is great and all that. And I saw a couple of people I knew and blah, blah, blah. But it was a good community thing. And Gabrina and Jessica over to Burleson Chamber of Commerce did an outstanding job, as did our Burleson Parks and Rec. And I'll have, in fact, speaking of Parks and Rec, on the 8th, a week from Thursday, I'll have Jen Basham on. We could talk about it then as well. But let's talk about, before we get into debt, let's talk about those who keep me out of debt. And that would be our sponsors. You like that segue? Yeah. Okay. I was working on that one. Yeah, CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. I'll have the new owners on next week, next Tuesday. Alex Curtis and her partner will be on. And CrossFitBurleson.com is where you'll find all the training programs, the classes, the times, the membership plans, whatever. I talked to Daniel about it, and he's pretty much it's just going to be operations as normal, just transfer of ownership. We're not talking about a complete rehaul. It's going to be what you'd expect it to do. And also, thank you to Shandy. She's working right now in a house for the Allard family. It really is interesting because I'm now able to see what she does firsthand, up close in person. She's very detailed. She keeps us informed. We know what's going on at every step. Selling a house ain't just like, here's your check and thanks for the keys. It's a big deal, and it's all this hassle, and Shandy helps make it a lot more understandable and a lot more easy. So if you're looking to move in and around this area, talk to Shandy over at the Stocksville Group, and she'll take care of you really well. And I could vouch for that in person. Also, thank you to Our Place as always. Thank you, Otto, for what you do for us. He's always willing and able to help with community events. It's a great place to do business. It's where I do my BNI networking business, where I do sponsor meetings if I can. He's always has a great atmosphere to do business in. So thank you, Otto, over the highway in Ellsbury. Also, speaking of great atmospheres, they have Wild Cigar and Culture. It's also a place you can do business. It's quiet. It's you could talk without having to shout. They have a conference room if you want to have a group meeting of some sort. They have a podcast studio. Sorry, Taylor, but it's there.
And watch it.
I know, but we know. We know. Okay. Anyway, I saw it. It's nice. You would approve. It's for rent, kind of thing. But anyway, he asked me to promote that a little bit. Sorry. Got to pay the bills. So thank you to Chris over at Wild Cigar and Culture. Also, thank you to Local Life. It should be out this week. It's always a great magazine. Tiffany does a great job. I mean, you really, if I get it every month with, I pick it up at Otto's at Our Place. I pick it up at several other places if I wanted to, because it's all over the place, and it goes to 30,000 homes, and it's always, always well done. And it does work. I do get calls from my ad in there about appearances or how much does it cost to sponsor, and on and on and on. So it's well worth it. So thank you, Tiffany. Also, we have with Gail at Southern Gym, Give her about another 3 weeks. She's gonna get that store downstairs, by golly. Even if she has to have a sidewalk sale, I guess, I don't know. Uh, but they got a lot going on. It's Father's Day coming up, so you wanna check in for that. Also, they'll have summer deals, but she is aiming to have her new location open by Father's Day. So Southern Gym over at the Windmiller Building. Also, thank you to Old Pro Roofing, John Williams, 817-734-2756. If you need some roof inspections, he'll do it for you. With Old Pro, they're a local outfit. They're down in Old Town, so they're a Burleson company, not some fly-by-night cowboys that come through every time there's a little bit of hailstorm or something like that. These guys have been here for a while. So call John at 817-734-2756, and he'll give you the straight scoop on your roof. And Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, Melissa Harmon, 682-804-0534. She saved me money. She'll save you money if possible. She'll tell you if she can't. But even if you like your insurance, it's still well worth a look because you never know. Because I got increased coverage on my house for $50 approximately less per month. And I've had several people that are guests on the show just give spontaneous endorsements at Texas Farm Bureau about how good they treat their clients. So call Melissa, 682-804-0534, and see if she can help you and your insurance budget. And if you do need repairs, particularly water damage or fire damage or unattended death damage or any kind of hazardous situation or environmental situation, call Lisa and Morris Smith over at Stop Restoration, where they get it right. When? The first time, because they always say those things. So go ahead and give them a holler. They'll also do inspections for you as well. I just got another text. Sorry, Lisa. All right. Anyway, Stop Restoration. Give them a call, Lisa Moore Smith. They're over by the tollway and whatnot. Taylor, I don't have the link yet. Is it just taking time as always?
Maybe.
Well, this silly thing there just popped up. I've been getting my home email, I guess, or internet is and all that's been really slow the last couple of days. So I don't know what that's all about, but it is what it is. I don't know.
Time to
I don't
upgrade.
have the I'm already paying enough.
No.
All right. Anyway, I'm gonna do the share routine, but no, I'm just saying it really has been slow this week. I was hoping that we don't have any problems here. That would be bad. Okay, I'm going through all the shares here, and that's taking its time as well. Come on, there's a couple more. I know there's a couple more that I just already shared. Okay, there you go. Boom, we're good. Okay, let's talk about the debt deal. Well, you could tell it's probably about the best deal you're going to get because of the reactions of the right and left. I was reading both editorials or comments by both left and right. For example, I read the New Republic, which is a very liberal outfit, and I'm not particularly. I used to really like the New Republic about 10 years ago. Now they've gone into a little bit off the edge a bit, but when they had a previous editor and owner, a guy named Martin Peretz, they really had a great magazine for those who wanted to be reading the liberal point of view without a lot of crap. And it was really great, but now it's not so much. Anyway, their writer, Jason Lincoln's, was just apoplectic about this deal. And he was very harsh about his commentary about Mr. Biden and how he basically gave up the farm, which is not true. Okay. Well, as we'll get into it. Also, but I read in the New York Post about how they feel like the Republicans failed because they didn't defund the IRS or at least cut back on the expansion and all the other business. And they also were very upset that they did not get more spending cuts. And so the New York Post, which is conservative, New Republic, which is liberal, both had a lot of hard things to say about it. I read also editorials from the Post, which is like, well, it's better than nothing. Same kind of attitude that New York Times had. I read also the editorials from the National Review and the Wall Street Journal, two conservative outlets, and they support this deal because they're not out there. They are not of the mindset that if you give up something, you've lost. They're not 100% or zero. They look at this deal as, well, by and large, Republicans came out ahead, and that's good enough. That's as good as it's going to get in a situation we have bipartisan ownership of the government. So the Times, or rather, I'm sorry, the Journal and the National Review were pretty supportive of this deal because they thought it was as good a deal as it's going to get. But of course, as everything else you get, it's going to be distorted through media. I watched a couple of news reports about it. NBC News I watch at 5:30 because Lester Holt is probably one of the least biased of the major networks. And he said, well, what does that got to do with him? Well, the news anchor does have a lot to say about what goes on the air. So that's why, it does make a difference who the host is or the anchor is. But Lester Holt was fairly even in the reporting about it. And it did talk about all the details of it. So I'm just going to kind of run through as quickly as I can without grinding through every jot and tittle on this thing to see what happens. One thing is that it does lift the cap for 2 years. That's one thing that the Republicans, some of the more right wing, were very upset. They wanted to keep it at, basically shut it down, but they can't. That's not going to happen. Here's the thing about when you have somebody like Gates or a Boebert or Chip Roy out of Texas or Andy Biggs out of Arizona that says, no, by God, not an inch. Well, their constituents in their home districts are going to be hurt by this kind of stance. Farmers or the elderly or vets or whatever else. And so this not an inch approach is not a good idea. We knew that debt ceiling was going to be lifted. Now they have left it unspecified, but it's going to be lifted for the next 2 years. So we'll see what happens in 2 years. Okay. Also, I got about 11 things here, but I'm going to whip through them because I don't want to beat you down. But I hope you're taking notes. Also, non-defense discretionary spending will be cut. It was supposed to be $757 billion this year. It's going to be 704. So we're talking about minor cuts in non-defense spending. The only two items in only two. Let's try it again, dum. The only two areas in which defense spending and veteran spending were the only ones that were increased. The others were not. And if you want a brief deal, non-discretionary means these are the obligations you already have, like Medicare and Social Security and interest on the debt. Those are non-negotiable. Okay, they're off the table. They weren't part of this deal by common agreement. Whether they should be or not, it's a whole nother show. But that I'm just saying that wasn't discussed. It's all those discretionary or choices that were made in these budgets, and they raised a little bit by defense. They raised a little bit on the veterans, and everything else is going to be cut. And so when you talk about cutting, oh gosh, what is it? The difference between 757, 704, we're talking about $53 billion, and you're raising those other two. That means there's going to be other cuts in other discretionary funding, mostly in infrastructure, education, things like that. But it does increase vet funding. It does increase defense spending, but all others are going to be held to about 2022 levels. Also, here's the deal. This is kind of a complex situation, but every year, the budget is not passed as one solid whole. You have 12 separate appropriation bills for the 12 separate departments. Okay, they go through the process just like you were taught in school, just like Schoolhouse Rock taught you, just like I hopefully taught you in high school or college. These 12 appropriations budgets go through the separate agencies and departments. And then you have a reconciliation bill at the end that puts it all together. And that's where a lot of the shenanigans take place. Several things have been passed through that reconciliation process, such as the $165 billion in spending for green projects or Trump's tax cuts or Obamacare. That's where a lot of this is kind of smushed into all this reconciliation process. And that's how some of the less popular items get passed. What this agreement says is if that agency does not have an agreed upon budget from the House and the Senate, then there's going to be an automatic 1% cut, a sequester, as they call it. So if the Health and Human Services comes in with a budget and they can't get it made and passed, then there's going to be a 1% cut from the last year. I like this part because basically it's going to put pressure on both Congress and the federal government, the agencies, to get their budgets passed in time because they're basically saying we're not going to go through the reconciliation process and cover up all these mistakes. So again, this right here alone, I like a lot because it's going to force the government by the end of December 31st to have their appropriations bills passed individually, or if they don't, then the individual departments will have an automatic 1% cut. So it's kind of a way of getting their minds focused. Another one I do like also is that I'm going to jump down to this one is that any kind of regulation that comes down from the agencies like EPA or others that costs money has to be offset by cuts in other areas. Okay, so if the EPA comes up with a ruling it's going to cost X amount of billions, it's going to have to find those X amount of billions somewhere else. Now, that is subject to a veto. Okay, so yeah, it may get through anyway, but it's going to force Mr. Biden to veto it. It's going to make Mr. Biden own what the EPA does, or the IRS does, or what the Department of Labor does, or you name the agency that imposes a lot of these regulations with impunity. Basically, if the Department of Labor says we have a new labor policy, it's going to cost $20 billion overall, then they're going to have to find $20 billion elsewhere to make up for it. Now, one more time, it is subject to veto, but Mr. Biden is going to have to own that, as opposed to keeping a distance from it. So I like those two things alone. That is the reason why I support this bill, is because the money, you know, well, we're talking about $55 billion saved or whatever. That's wonderful. The go further with that savings. The New York Times estimates that over a decade, it's going to save $860 billion. That's $86 billion a year, which ain't, to us, is a lot of money, but the government's, that's a rounding error. That's just money for cab fare practically. But anyway, the point is I like this for those two reasons alone. It is going to force agencies to present and have a budget passed, as opposed to just squeaking by with this crappy reconciliation process. And it's going to make the president and whoever it is, own agency doctrines or dictates or rules that cost money. They're either going to have to find the money elsewhere or veto that proposal and then explain that to the American people. All right. Also, they did return some COVID money, about $28 billion. It did return about $1.4 billion from the IRS. This right here is one of the reasons why the conservatives really don't like this bill, is because the IRS is still going to be funded at a high level. But basically, it's going to be 1.4 billion this year and then next year. So it will take some of the funding, but there will be increased hiring of agents. And so a lot of the people like Gates and Roy and the rest of them, that was a real red line for them, is they did not want the IRS to be funded extra at all. In fact, if they had their way, to defund it, but that's not possible. But just that is one of the real big issues there. Is that that the IRS is still going to be hiring agencies, and they, of course, it's advertised that, well, we'll go after tax cheats and the wealthy and all this other stuff, and I think, nah, that's not going to happen. They go after a wealthy tax cheat, they're going to face this whole army of tax accountants and lawyers. Whereas, so I think I really do have concerns about the IRS turning its attention to middle class and small business owners, because they're easier targets. I do have concerns about that. I've had concerns about that for a long time. They're trying to make it sound like, well, you're going to get more help with your taxes and you'll have your phone call answered and all this other stuff. I personally have concerns, but this is one of the bigger sticking points with the far right, as the IRS has not been rescinded. Also, as far as defense spending, an increase of 3% for the next 2 years. Also, another red line for the conservatives was the work requirements. They wanted people to have to work for federal subsidies and programs and welfare, social welfare programs. They adjusted some of the rules that already were in place, increasing ages requirements, but they did not touch Medicaid in terms of work requirements. They did not touch food stamps as much, basically just raised the age limit from 50 to 54. It did exempt specifically homeless and veterans. So their food stamps will not be affected. So we don't need to, don't buy into the left-wing article here about how we're going to be putting people out on the street who can't afford to feed themselves. That's not going to happen. All right. So the veterans and homeless were specifically exempt. As far as other types of work requirements, they were just modifications of those that already existed. The big one that the right wing wanted was work requirements for Medicaid, and that was taken off the table pretty early in the process. And so there's no work requirements for Medicaid. Administrative rules I mentioned about offsets. Here's another one I like, and this is another reason why conservatives should give this every open-minded consideration. It streamlines the environmental review process. It is an immense hassle to build anything of size or substance in this country, because environmental impact studies and assessments and reviews, they go for decades. There's articles all over the newspapers, on the internet about how long it's taken to get something built because of environmental impact studies and assessments and whatever else. Basically, it will streamline it quite a bit. It'll give them the EPA 1 year for an environmental review and an assessment, and a 2-year deadline on impact statements. That's dramatically shorter. The expense that these statements and these assessments are not borne by the taxpayers; they're borne by the company involved. And so, a lot of projects have been basically scuttled because they just couldn't get through the EPA process. And so now there's about a 2-year limit on this whole process. And if they can't get it done, the law says that they can sue the EPA. If they don't get it done within the timeframes, then the companies involved can sue the EPA for negligence or delays and assess them the costs. So I really do like that one as well because as anybody will tell you, just building even like a small building or a division or some sort of factory or whatever you want to call it, just building anything at all or any kind of road process from the county, it takes years to get through all the red tape that the government throws out there. And some states are worse than others. Now, will that change what's going on in California? I don't think so because they have their own environmental group that cause all these troubles. This doesn't affect those, but it does affect the federal government. So I like that. Also, uh, one of the things that's really irritated a lot of people is a school loan thing. There is no provision in this budget deal that would pay off school loans, and it does take away Biden's ability to put a moratorium on payments. So when this last moratorium is over, which is the end of August, he won't be able to extend that moratorium without congressional consent, and it ain't happening. So Biden's going to, not be able just to indefinitely keep kicking payments of school loans down the road. So beginning in September, if you have school loans that have been suspended by Biden, they're not going to be eligible for that anymore. That to me, honestly, I think was a very dubious constitutional power. I really didn't think that was possible under the Constitution, but we kind of ignored it, or the cases haven't been heard. But now it's not going to be a possibility. And here's the one that got the environmentalists screaming. Joe Manchin got in the deal a pipeline that's going to be built from West Virginia to Virginia. And the reason why they're all upset by this natural gas pipelines that crosses protected wetlands and forests and about 1,000 streams and rivers, according to the EPA and environmental groups. But he got it done. This is absolutely a little bonus there to make sure Joe Manchin votes for it. Joe Manchin got this pipeline for West Virginia. And will it change things for him personally, politically? I don't think so. I saw a poll today and it shows him 22 points behind the leading Republican for 2024 Senate race in West Virginia, the current governor, a guy named Jim Justice. And he's 22 points behind. That's amazing for an incumbent senator. But that's his problem. But the point is, environmentalists are really, really angry because they basically see this as Joe Manchin's payoff to get his vote. And there's other people say, well, if Joe Manchin can have that pipeline, why can't we have one? Because the biggest problem we have in our fuel industry or or fossil fuel industries and other industries is not so much availability; it's transportation, just getting it there. I've read several times it's cheaper to buy foreign natural gas than it is buy American because they could ship it in, and it's quicker and easier to get through the ports into those pipelines than it is through, from Louisiana to Pennsylvania, for example, which was another pipeline that's been scuttled. Anyway, that being said, so that's essentially it. Okay, to sum all that up, basically, you're going to have a moratorium, at least, or a suspension of increases. And see, here's what also drives me nuts too. To say the Democrats who hate this bill, and there's a lot of them, say they talk about all these payment cuts. We're cutting payment. No, you're just slowing or stopping the rate of increase. You're not cutting a dime in most of your discretionary funding, except for at least minor trims here and there. But the point is that this idea that they're having massive cuts to the budget is just not true. Okay, anytime that you go from a 3% rise, now it's going to be just 1% rise. which is part of the agreement, they say that's a spending cut. Well, only in Washington, where a reduction in the growth of spending is considered a cut. That's the only place I know where that's thought of as a decrease, is when you just don't increase it as fast. So the Democrats, when they yell and holler about this budget being tremendous debt cuts or spending cuts and all this other stuff, and they're playing a semantic game. We really did not cut the budget significantly. $55 billion next year is nothing. It really is. It's not, when you have a budget the size of $6.1 trillion, $50 billion is not even a rounding statistic error. So don't buy into that. Now, as far as the Republicans' complaints, my two things I'd say about that is it was unrealistic for them just to take the budget bill that came out, the Limit, Save, Grow Act that they passed back in April. It was very unrealistic for them just to hand it over to the president for him to say, well, I got no choice and I'll sign it. That this is part of the process, the sausage making process, as they call it. It was unrealistic for Gates and crowd to say it's either this or we passed or nothing at all. That doesn't happen in any bills, not just this one, but every bill that's passed through the House and or Senate is subject to negotiation and change. That's the parliamentary procedures. And so for them to say it's this or nothing is unrealistic, not just for this bill again, but for any kind of legislative process. Second of all, considering some of the administrative changes that are being made, like I mentioned before, the restrictions on EPA and the restrictions on these environmental assessment reviews that take forever, and the idea that if you're going to impose something unilaterally through some government rule, that they're going to have to find the money or force Joe Biden to own it, then I think those are right there, worth it right there. And also, I really do like this. If they don't pass those appropriation bills, they get a 1% automatic deduction. So they got plenty of incentive. Let's say the House and Human Services screws around and they try to ask for all this stuff. If they mess up, they'll lose about $30 billion in spending. So they'll have incentive to make a budget that's acceptable to the majority of Congress. So do I like all the provisions of this debt deal? Of course not. Who does? No one's going to like it 100%. But I would say this is why I liked Reagan so much, because Reagan would look at this deal and say, well, we got most of what we wanted. We got the majority of the deal in our favor. Let's take it. Reagan was not a 100% or nothing kind of guy. He was the kind of guy that if he saw, well, I'll look this over and about 75% of it I like, 25% of it I don't, I'll sign it, because he wasn't going to let total victory stand in the way of any kind of victory. Is this a victory for the Republicans over the Democrats? See, that's another thing that drives me crazy about the media is they always post this like of a sports contest. Biden lost, Republicans won, vice versa. The truth of the matter is it's all in the eyes of the beholder. I personally think the Republicans did about as well as they could and some of these provisions. And as far as the Democrats go, I think there's some things that they're not going to like, but they also can't risk not voting for it and having the default hit next Monday, and they'll own responsibility for it. Now, as far as the odds of getting it through the House and Senate, today on Tuesday, the 30th, it's got to go through the Rules Committee of the House. And what the Rules Committee will do is they'll put the parameters of the debate and the time and whatever else. However, it can fail there. If you get a majority of the people on the Rules Committee say, we do not want this bill to go forward, that kills it. Is that a possibility? Yes, it is, because 3 of the members of the Rules Committee are part of that Freedom Caucus that Kevin McCarthy, not Joe Biden, but Kevin McCarthy agreed to get a speakership. Part of the deal was, I'll put these 3 Freedom Caucus members on the Rules Committee in turn for their votes for the speakership. Now it's got to get past them. If it fails, then the Republicans have completely failed, because now if the economy crashes, it's going to be on their watch, their responsibility. My guess is it'll pass a Rules Committee, and then it'll go tomorrow night is when it is the earliest it can be voted on, is like 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Will it pass? It's going to pass with About 2/3 of the Republicans, about 2/3 of the Democrats that'll say yes. There's going to be people, about 50 or so Democrats and about 50 or so Republicans that will not vote for it. But I think by a bipartisan majority, it will pass by, I don't know. I'm not going to guess. And it's not going to be, it's going to be fairly close. But here's a real sign that if it's in trouble or not. If that vote is delayed, like we go into Thursday and Thursday afternoon and Thursday night, and it's still not had a vote, that means they don't have the votes yet. The alternative for the Republicans, if they do not pass this, is they're going to either take ownership of the crash or give Biden what he's wanted all along, which is a clean debt ceiling raise without any other restrictions. It'll be on them whether or not they cave in at the last minute to Joe Biden, or they cause the economy to have significant damage long term. We still have damage from the last time we went through this in 2011 when our credit ratings went down. It's cost us, it's estimated, about $5 billion more a year in loan interest and bond interest. And we'll still have impact over this. But the point is, if this fails, the media, and with some justification, is going to blame the Republican Party because it's now in their court. If they either sidetrack this thing or don't vote on it, or if it fails, then it's going to be pretty catastrophic. And the Republicans, whatever political advantage and political headwinds they got out of this deal, will be right out the window. My guess is it'll pass, but we still got about 72 hours of drama to go. And here is a quote. So I'm on the Titanic and it goes down in 4 days, but they streamlined the dinner reservation process and will complete 5 new shuffleboards tomorrow. Well, it's the best deal we'll get. Well, there you go. Okay. It's going to go down in 4 days. Well, the thing about it is, will the economy crash if this goes down? And the answer would be very, very significantly yes, because there's so much of our money that's tied up in government bonds. Government bonds are more than just the safest investment in the world. They're also the benchmark by which all other investments are made. So when you invest in the stock market, it's because you think you'll get better money in the stock market than you would on buying government bonds. Of course, there's higher risk in the stock market. And so the baseline for every risk-based financial decision is going to be on what does the government pay on its bonds. And if I could do better than that, then I'm going to make that investment. And if the baseline no longer exists, then we have no basis whatsoever of evaluating investment opportunities, not just in the stock market, but expanding your business or creating a business. Now, my friend here that says that basically this is just window dressing, and this particular deal, given these particular parameters, this really is about the best that's going to happen. Will the American economy crash if this passes? No, but if it doesn't, yeah, well, will we go down like the Titanic? We'll be hurt for a long, long time. There'll be a lot of unemployment. There'll be a lot of uncertainty in the markets. There'll be a lot of business decisions that'll be delayed if ever enacted because they don't know where the market's going and where the investments are going and what the rates of return are and things like that. So yes, I support this deal. Am I 100% excited about it? No, but I'd rather have this than the possible consequences, which is either again a crash or the Republicans capitulating and giving Joe Biden a clean credit debt bill. And none of this takes place. Okay, let's talk about Mr. Paxton for a while. Okay, Ken Paxton, it's no secret I have a very poor opinion of Mr. Paxton, always have. He's been under indictment for the last 8 years for securities fraud, and some of the impeachment articles refer to that. But he's been under indictment and has continually kicked the case around the state for change of venue, continuances, delays of all sorts of things. And part of the impeachment articles is many, many misstatements he's made during this process to the courts and to reporting regulators. Here's the thing about impeachment. Impeachment isn't just that he broke the law. The impeachment means he conducted himself in a manner unworthy of the office. It isn't so much that he violated certain statutes, which he's being accused of, but the overall impeachment articles could be nothing more if they wanted to say he just not handling the job appropriately and with integrity. The same thing happens with the president in a sense. Our impeachment process does not mean so and so broke a law. Now, that being said, Mr. Paxton is being accused of breaking the law. He's not just being accused of being a bad attorney general or anything like that. He's being accused of breaking the law in several areas, particularly in the relationship with the donor, a land developer named Nate Paul, whom I never heard of before this process. Nate Paul is a land developer in the San Antonio and mid Central Texas area who's a major donor, Mr. Paxton, and several of the articles in impeachment have to do with the way Mr. Paxton used his office to prevent investigations and allow Mr. Paul to escape certain investigations and inquiries and shield him from appropriate government oversight. Also, the fact that they had certain financial relationships. And then there's also a secondary thing is that when um, when several members of his own staff blew the whistle on all this, he used the office. Paxton did use the office to pursue and prosecute or persecute these people and make it all sorts of career-ending insinuations and allegations and whatever else. So when they sued Mr. Paxton personally, they basically settled out of court for $3.3 million, which he tried to bill the Texas government with. So he got personally sued and he tried to get the state of Texas to pay for it. But rather than just me summarize, I'm going to read directly from the articles. It's right here. I got this off the Dallas Morning News. It's a public record, so it's not. And they filed the articles last night. So if anybody wants to see it, you could just get the exact articles themselves without summary or whatever else. So I'm just going to read through some of them. There's 20 articles altogether. I'm going to look at about 8 or 9 of them. Article 2 says specifically Paxton caused employment of his office to prepare an opinion in an attempt to avoid the impending foreclosure sales of properties belonging to Nate Paul or business entities controlled by Paul. Paxton concealed his actions by soliciting the chair of a Senate committee to serve as a straw requester. Furthermore, Paxton directed employees of his office to reverse their legal conclusion for the benefit of Paul. So basically, they had a process in place, and he intervened in it, and he got one of his allies in the Senate to act as kind of a straw requester for a review. And all this means is that he used his office to shield Mr. Paul from appropriate reviews by the state of government on certain foreclosures and certain other property deals. So he protected Paul from possibly, we'll find that out in the trial, possibly being skirting the rules about certain foreclosure deals. Number 4 says, come on down. Okay, specifically, Paxton improperly obtained access to information held by his office that had not been publicly disclosed for the purpose of providing the information to the benefit of Nate Paul. So basically, he gave information that's not publicly available and not been publicly disclosed. He gave it to Paul secretly under the table to help prepare his cases. So he basically showed him the state of Texas's playbook when it came to the legal processes Mr. Paul was going through. That's definitely a violation of the law, okay? Because he's given inside information to the opposing attorney of his major donor. Let's see, number 5 here specifically. Paxton engaged Brandon Comack, a licensed attorney. By the way, this Brandon Comack is an attorney that works for Nate Paul, to conduct an investigation into a baseless complaint during which Comack issued more than 30 grand jury subpoenas in an effort to benefit Nate Paul or Paul's business entities. So rather than using his own counsel, he hired counsel provided to him by Nate Paul so he could basically harass the whistleblowers and other investigators with 30 grand jury subpoenas in an effort to benefit Paul. So he was letting Nate Paul's attorneys handle the case against Nate Paul, which is a violation of the law. When this was exposed, they basically they had several people, they quote, blow the whistle on it. They made it public, okay? Article 6 here. While holding his office as Attorney General, Warren Kenneth Paxton violated the duties of his office by terminating and taking adverse personnel action against employees of his office in violation of the state's whistleblower law, which is very clearly specified here, Chapter 554 in the Government Code. Specifically, Paxton terminated employees of his office who made good faith reports of his unlawful actions to law enforcement authorities. Paxton terminated the employees without good cause or due process and in retaliation for reporting his illegal acts and improper conduct. Furthermore, Paxton engaged in a public and private campaign to impugn the employees' professional reputations or prejudice their future employment. So basically, when they got called out by members of his own staff, this happened about a year ago, he fired them and then hurt their political, well, not political, their professional reputations. All right, and you can imagine, and these people will be testifying in the trial, which is going to be in late August, by the way. Oh, any others that are I think there's one other, number 9 and 10. I'm going to just kind of jump down to that. Here's one that he was engaged in bribery. Specifically, Paxton benefited from Nate Paul's employment, in which whom Paxton was having an extramarital affair. Paul received favorable legal assistance from or specialized assistance to the Office of Attorney General. So basically, in return for special favors, he got his girlfriend a job. Now, what's ironic here is that his wife, Angela Paxton, is a senator from the McKinney area, and she will be voting on whether to keep her husband in office or not. Should she recuse herself? Absolutely. Will she? I doubt it very seriously. But anyway, he received in return favors. He also, it goes on to number 10 here, other favors he received from Nate Paul. Specifically, Paxton benefited from Nate Paul providing renovations to Paxton's home. Paul received favorable legal assistance from or specializing access to the Office of Attorney General. So he did free repairs and upgrades on Paxton's home, which is a violation of the law. Okay. Now, as far as the whistleblower complaints, I'm going to go back to those in a minute. Well, here I'm going to scroll back up. About the whistleblowers, we talked about already how he engaged in a public act of trying to hurt their reputations, whatever else, and basically that not only did he do it himself, he also directed his employees to do it. Article 7 says specifically, Paxton directed employees of his office to conduct a sham investigation into whistleblower complaints made by employees whom Paxton had terminated and to create and publish a lengthy written report containing false or misleading statements in Paxton's defense. Number 8, which is along the same lines, specifically, Paxton entered into a settlement agreement with the whistleblowers that provides for payment of the settlement from public funds, which is not allowable. The settlement agreement stayed the wrongful termination suit and conspicuously delayed the discovery of facts and testimony at trial to Paxton's advantage, which deprived the electorate of its opportunity to make an informed decision when voting for Attorney General. This happened last August, right before the elections. Now, the thing about it is, settlement of a personal lawsuit and trying to get the state to pay for it. No, thank you. That doesn't work that way. He wasn't acting in behalf of the state of Texas. He was acting in his own behalf. And so when he tried to get that $3.3 million payment through the House part of the budget, they said, forget it. We're not paying for your bill. And so they denied it. And so that's not part of the bill. And that's a whole other thing about the Texas legislature. I'm going to get into that. They're going to special session soon, and it's a mess, but that's the deal. So to sum this up, to put it in real terms, the basis of the accusations against Mr. Paxton is that he used his office to protect a major donor from public scrutiny and public investigations and from other legal processes, that he received in return for all this renovations in the house and employment of his girlfriend, that he also used his office to provide information and to provide the attorney for Mr. Paul access to information that was not available to the public at the time, and that he allowed basically the people that called him out on this to be prosecuted and persecuted, both by the office, by official actions of his office, and by him personally. Is he capable of this? Ask the members of the House Representatives who, on Saturday, when they were voting for this process, received personal calls from Mr. Paxton threatening them politically, that he would get people to run against him in the primaries. For those who think Mr. Paxton is being persecuted and run out of town and all this other stuff, like Mr. Cruz has said, or Mr. Trump has said, that it's a travesty, I believe is the word that Mr. Cruz used. I think if you look at this material, it's pretty incriminating. Now, is it enough? We'll find out in September, no, rather in August. This is Mr. Paxton's being charged with these 20 articles of impeachment. Now you're going to go to the Senate, and no later than August 28th, but hopefully before then, where the Senate will conduct the trial. And there's 31 senators, 19 Republicans, 12 Democrats. You need 2/3 to remove Mr. Paxton. Assuming that one of the 19, Mrs. Paxton, will say no on the removal, you'll need about 9 of the 18 Republicans in the Senate to say yes, because you're going to count on the Democrats all saying yes. Is that possible? I don't know. I do know that in the House vote, it was 121 to 23. There are 86 Republicans in the House of Representatives down in Austin. 63 of them voted yes, included our guy, Dwayne Burns, including another local congressman, or member of the House, rather, Charlie Guerin. 80 out of 86, 63 said yes to these charges. Had it been split almost down the middle, it would have been very unfortunate. But the panel that recommended these, it's a 5-person panel, 2 Democrats, 3 Republicans, unanimously brought these forward after a certain number of hearings were held. It was brought to the House, and when you have 63 of the 86 say yes, to me that's a significant vote. Now, will it get through the Senate? The Senate's more conservative and under the control of Dan Patrick, much more than the House is under the control of Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan. Will they get it or not? I do not know, because again, you're going to need half the Republicans in the House or Senate rather to do it. Will they do it? Don't know. Now, I've had a very poor opinion of Paxton all along. This is just hammers it home. Here's the thing I would ask Republicans that support Mr. Paxton, and it was interesting because I was thinking this yesterday, and then I watched NBC5 News. They had a report out there of a pro-Paxton rally in McKinney at the Collin County Courthouse, and the reporter from Channel 5 asked the main speaker of this whole event, isn't there somebody else that can do what you want to have done in the Attorney General's office? And I thought the same thing. I said, why are they so hung up on Paxton? It's not like there's not other Republicans who would be just as conservative and take on Joe Biden and, sue him about the border issues and all this other stuff. Ken Paxton ain't the only guy that can do it. And there's a lot of Republicans that be more than glad to do without all the baggage. And she asked him that. She said, isn't there somebody else that could do what you want to have done without having to go and support Mr. Paxton? And the guy said, well, he said, yeah, a lot of people could, but God put Paxton here, and that's why we're going to support him. Well, okay, I don't think God put Paxton in the Attorney General's office to do these things he's been accused of, or a lot worse. He surely didn't put him in there to have girlfriends hired by donors, or have his house remade, or profit personally from it. Now, that man's opinion. He's welcome to it. But the point is that there are other Republicans that can pursue some of the goals that the Attorney General's office has been pursuing, like in terms of border enforcement or other issues, without all this other business. But the Texas Republican Party as a entity are 100% behind him. The chair of the Texas Republicans, a guy named Matt Rinaldi, 100% behind him. And so we'll see what happens in mid to late August. Will more come out? Who knows? But here's my summary of Ken Paxton's deal. And I say this to people know I don't care for Paxton, but when is it going to come to the point as I consider myself as Republicans, that we're going to say, look, enough. We can get what we want done without having to go through people like Trump and Paxton. Why are we so committed to these men? Why can't we pursue goals as a Republican Party, worthy goals, without having to saddle ourselves with these kind of cretins and lawbreakers. We don't have to have Ken Paxton. We don't have to have Donald Trump to do what we need to have done. There are a lot of reasonable Republicans that can deal with the problems that we want to see dealt with. Yes, and they may have to negotiate, and they may not be throwing bombs and calling people names and trashing the other side, and it's not nearly as exciting. But government isn't meant to be exciting. It's meant to be grinding, dull work. And we need grinding, dull people sometimes of integrity to get it done, not people who talk only in rallies and throw all these hot sports opinions around on Twitter or Truth Social or whatever the platform is. Why are we so committed to men like Ken Paxton? We don't have to be. There are decent, honest Republicans of conservative political views that we can support. And that's why I get really upset, because if people say, well, like this guy says, well, it's Paxton or nobody. Well, then we're going to have nobody. Texas is not going to stay red all its life, all its existence, maybe a better way to put it. We need better people. We need better people than some of these right wingers and left wingers in Congress. We need better people. We're not committed to Ken Paxton personally or Donald Trump personally. We should be committed to a certain point of view and a certain set of standards and a certain set of moral convictions that transcend whoever's co-opting them at the time for personal political gain. Donald Trump doesn't give two damns about you guys. He never did. He wants to be politically relevant and the president for life. Ken Paxton, same thing. He doesn't care about y'all. He just wants to be attorney general and be the man. So we need to remain our convictions, our moral and political convictions that transcend whoever is occupying that seat at the time, and not tie ourselves to these people. And that's all I got to say about that. I hope you share this with your friends. I think it's important that they know both the debt deal and what's going on down in Austin. And also that last little rant, I've been wanting to say that for a while. I just get so fed up with people tying their political values and moral convictions around a person and not something more lofty than that. So anyway, share this with your friends. Thursday, rather, I'm going to have Jennifer Woods of Harvest House. Also, I remind you that the Next Step Women's Center is having their Walk for Life Saturday. So if you haven't gotten involved with that, there's still plenty of time for that. So go on their webpage. There's a QR code that you can get involved in. Even if you can't make it this Saturday, you got weddings like a couple of friends of mine and my niece has, whatever, you could still donate, even if you're not able to participate. So check out the Walk for Life for the Next Step Women's Center. They do really, really great work. I guess that's about it. I'll see y'all in the studio on Thursday. So y'all take care.